Thank you for letting me in your den. This is a wonderful place, and it's so multifaceted because it's not only a studio for showing products, it's also a very active environment with the recording studio, active musicians, and mixing, and a lot of things goes on here. So it's a very musical place. If you were here where I sit and look around, you will see up there there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 drums. So everything here is sort of like optimized around getting the perfect impression, perfect rim shot, essentially.
Michael, thank you so much for coming. We had yesterday, it's now March 27th as we are recording this. We had yesterday our annual event. You came to introduce really these bass modules, the BM3s, which are now production bass models, and couldn't get enough of them. We had them downstairs here and upstairs with the M1s. You played them here with the new M2 Gold Signature, was the first in the United States. The updated and improved M2 model, which has Gold Signature technology, which I understand is a trickle down from the M8, which we just saw in Denmark.
Yeah.
The M8 Gold Signature.
In the process of making the M8, we developed a new mid-range driver that was so significantly much better than what we previously had, that we had to put it in the M8, of course, and we knew immediately when we did that, people will ask, how about our M series, can they get that as well? So we decided to make an upgrade path so we don't leave any of our M clients stranded in a way.
No one's left behind?
Yeah, no one's left behind. So people can go to the Gold Signature version for the difference.
And it wasn't just the driver, it was also the tweeter, right?
It was also the tweeter, yes.
So also the tweeter got improved. And so is there also a change in the crossover, or is the crossover the same?
The crossover is the same.
Crossover stays the same.
The fun thing is that while the drivers and the speakers sound different, in many ways different, improved in many aspects, you cannot really decipher that in measurements. Specs for the driver, sensitivity for the driver, everything is the same. But sonic performance is different, and that just means that there are so many nuances to what you hear that is beyond any measurement.
We heard that in Denmark when Lars played the M1 versus the M1 Gold Signature. And it was a huge change.
Yes.
Why is that?
Yeah, I think that over time you discover materials that just perform sonically better. So we changed the skin layer on the membrane from one that has 2 different materials to now 3 different materials, meaning that you get 7 layers.
7 layers.
Seven
okay.
layers. And it seems like every time you do something with constricted layers, even if they're only micron thin, they sort of eliminate problems. And the more you can eliminate even tiny resonances in the membrane, the better. The more pistonic, the better, the less coloration you get from the driver. Now the driver in itself is a very good driver because it has a carbon spread toe and a no-mix honeycomb and a carbon spread toe. So essentially it's a very, very stiff inert membrane. And because it has spread toe, meaning that the fibers are
like this,
90 degrees, then you get a situation where the driver is very stiff here and very stiff here, but on 45 degrees it can fold rather easily. And if you look at it from a radial perspective, every single step in radials has a different stiffness. And that's why that driver by itself, that membrane by itself, take away the first fundamental breakup.
Explain that a little bit more.
When you have a driver, you push it at the voice coil and it's hanging by the edge, then this distance of membrane can start swinging like a string.
Yeah.
But because the string tension or the stiffness is different all around, it's very hard to get a uniform flexing of the whole thing, because it flexes here with one frequency and there with another frequency. So you don't get that ring type first fundamental breakup in the membrane. And when you avoid that, the membrane becomes quiet. But that does not mean that you don't have any breakup modes, because
they're just not as audible.
They are not as prominent, and typically are sifted up in the frequency band, so they are less of a problem.
Where would they occur when we talk about frequencies?
7, 8, 9 kilohertz, you will see something, some woolliness, but not high. But that's where when we put this skin layer on, that skin layer has also a stiffness, but very different from those. So that skin layer breakup is different than the other breakups. And in between those two, there's a polymer, a sorbutane type polymer, which is very viscous and very damping. So you create something that's essentially very, very stiff, but you have this layer on top of that acts like it damps those type of resonances.
You mentioned earlier, when we spoke earlier today, that the rifles have a similar technology.
Yeah, you don't want to hurt your shoulder for shock absorption. So it's a similar material to what you use on a gun stock.
Is there now, from the Gold Signature driver to the M driver, how many layers did we have in the M driver versus
in the M drivers? We have 5 layers.
5 layers.
Yeah,
and
two different materials. Those layers were zirconium and titanium.
Yeah.
Here we have hafnium. So we have hafnium nitride. We have titanium nitride. We have zirconium and zirconium nitride. So those are the layers that we have building up. And then in order to get something that is easy to clean and good for the hands, we put a pure layer of titanium on the very outside.
That's where they look similar, right?
Yeah, but when you start looking and place them next to each other, you will see these are slightly lighter.
Slightly lighter.
Slightly lighter.
Than the Gold Signatures are slightly lighter than the original M's.
Yeah, but very little.
So more layers, different materials of layers. The same carbon structure?
The same carbon structure. These layers we have this fantastic cooperation with the Technological Institute in Denmark, and that is sort of like a government-owned facility. Yeah. The cooperation started many, many years ago, and it started because I wanted to build a cartridge. So I had this idea that I wanted to make a hollow diamond tube, and I wanted to put that on a whisker of very high temperature plastic. So I can make a conical diamond tube grown outside on a plastic needle. And in that respect, I got in contact with Bjarne Holt Christensen, which is a PhD running that, but he works together with a lot of different companies. I think that our cooperation with the Technological Institute, this facility in Denmark, that its sole purpose is to serve small and mid-sized companies like ours with key technology or state-of-the-art technology.
Right. So we talked about the membrane, but that's only half the secret, right?
Yeah. In the step up from the Silver Supreme to the Gold Signature, we added a gold layer to the rings inside.
With the new Gold Signature.
Yeah, with the new Gold Signature driver. We also changed the basket to a more sonically transparent and made that from machined parts that we screwed together to make the basket.
The original zirconium baskets were extremely light and airflow optimized. The new baskets look very different.
The zirconium baskets were structurally optimized for maximum rigidity from the amount of material.
With low mass.
With low mass.
Yeah, maximum rigidity, low mass. Now you changed that a little bit.
Yeah, now we optimize for maximum airflow and more, and it turns out heavier as well.
It's heavier, right?
Yeah, it weighs 4 times as much as the zirconium bar. So the driver becomes heavier, and for some reason, even you put it into a heavy cabinet, the heavy driver sort of gets a more solid foundation, because when the membrane moves out, the basket moves back, and also it's sturdier, it's stiffer, so there's less vibration going on between the magnet and the faceplate. Because when the membrane moves, you have forces one direction, and the next millisecond you have them in another direction, so you always create a vibration. So vibrational input from the baskets is overlaying the vibrational input that you hear.
Right, but coming back to the zirconium baskets, when you say optimized for airflow, I mean, they were extremely, you know, if you look at them, there was so much space, right, for the air to flow. How would you say the new baskets have an improved airflow design?
If you look at the area behind the membrane that is a basket and not or air, the ratio is higher on the new. There's more air and less material behind the new drivers.
Interesting.
So the zirconium baskets were optimized not for the airflow but for the rigidity.
Excellent.
At some expense for the airflow.
Yeah. Let's talk what changed with the tweeter.
The faceplate has changed. It's now stainless steel, also with it's 6-layer coating, also hafnium, zirconium, and titanium. So it's a 6-layer coating, ending with a nitride.
And before it was
aluminium.
Aluminum. Okay. And how does it affect the performance?
The same way as one of the new darks compared to one of the old darks in aluminium. Aluminium has a brittle sound compared to a stainless steel, which is softer and more gentle. So it's a little bit odd we talk about these things.
It's also heavier,
because,
right?
Yeah, it's also heavier.
Yeah.
It's a little bit odd we talk about these things because for most people, those things cannot really matter. But it matters a lot. And the fun thing is that these tiny things that all of them are small, but all of them contribute to the sonic signature of the speaker. And when you get something that has a better tone for us, or performs better with music, it's a big change.
That's what we noticed. That was for me, I heard it immediately and I was like, then I had to analyze it. What is it that I'm actually hearing? Why is this better? But I think tone sums it up really nicely. I was like, there's a better tone. It sounds even more natural, sounds even more realistic. And at the same time, there was more microdynamics going on. There was
because when you take these small contribution of noise or tone that we don't like and it's not fitting with the music here and a little there and a little there, all of a sudden when that's gone, it leaves room for more content.
Yeah.
It simply leaves room for more content.
It was just a clearer, more open window into the sound. Remarkable, really. Let's talk about the bass modules. The BM3s are essentially a new generation of a subwoofer, superseding what subwoofers did in the past, that were moving air in one direction, essentially. And you pointed out yesterday that musical instruments work very differently, also in our past conversation in Denmark. Let's talk a little bit more how you got started with this, the Diapole. What was your journey in developing these?
Well, I've been doing as a DIY guy speakers pretty much ever since I was in public school. My father had a workshop, so I could machine most everything. So this week I had a speaker cabinet. He also had Axxess because there was a fire in Scanspik factory in the 80s sometimes. And that fire, my father and a colleague of his buy from the insurance company a lot of drivers. So I had a cabinet like this and drivers would fall out.
Plenty to experiment with.
So every week a new speaker project. But I learned by doing, so to speak. I did not understand crossovers, but I got to learn to make crossovers and understand over time how they work, how they function, what they do, and why they're even needed. I mean, when you have a nice tweeter and it just emits blue smoke, you know a crossover is maybe needed.
Right.
Yeah.
That's speaker design.
Yeah,
speaker
but then during university, by coincidence or by accident or by fate, I don't know, I got to share. We had some rooms in the third floor of a building under the roof, and my neighbor, he was also into high-end. And we built speakers together, and we built many speakers together, from horn types to apogee types, and I created.
Different.
Yeah, so we created with
methods.
magnets and foils and knives and tables replicas of the apogee duettas and the apogee full range. So we did these door-sized panel speakers, and I had this small. It was not even an apartment. It was 2 rooms. I had one was living space and the other was a bedroom. But this living space then was full of these big door-sized panel speakers, and I loved the way that those performed, especially how the bass was floating. It was there. It was solid. It was maybe not dynamically to the level that I could dream of, but the quality of that bass. And then later on, the Mackies and the Apogees, and even the first Logan CLSs had an amazing bass for this panel, this very light membrane. So that way of presenting bass, I always fancied. I've been playing around with the designs of the M8 for a long, long period. And I've done many designs also with the drivers in the front. I did a design where I had it was a 4-tower speaker where you had a bass tower. And this was also 8 inch. And then it was sort of folded in. And then when you started up, the wings could fold out and the baffles become really, really wide. Because one of the problems
I've
with
seen the prototype drawings, yeah.
And one problem with open baffle design is that they will short circuit themselves. So they will not play the very deepest bass unless they have quite a wide baffle. But this folded design, this is a folded dipole or air motion transformer, creates a situation where there's quite a long distance from the center of the membrane inside all the way around to the backside.
Yeah.
So that's essentially a very wide baffle dipole.
And that's why this
in
also
a compact design
allows you to go really, really low. What's the lowest frequency on the BM3s?
But you will measure SPLs down to DC, but there's not much on a record that requires that. But it's remarkable what happens if you have a recording of a door closing. That pressure pulse from the door closing, you will get that. Amazing. But the advantage over learning this, I now understand why dipoles have this bass. It's because dipoles always work with the room, not against the room.
Right.
It puts air in motion and does not create pressure.
And that's why we yesterday noticed we didn't need any correction. We have the excellent PSI audio electronic bass traps, which we often had to use when we had a lot of bass in the room from either big speakers or additional subwoofers, even excellent brands.
But this is a bass trap. This is an active bass trap and a bass emitter at the same time. So it works as a perfect room correction tool.
I sat in every of the seats here, and I was like, wow, this is remarkable. I'm hearing the bass, but it's not too much bass. It doesn't feel unpleasant. It doesn't feel
the thing
congested.
The thing is that every room has a pressure resonance.
Yes.
Right? And that's where the room builds up pressure when you emit bass. But what happened here is because you have the reverse pressure on the backside of it. So the room's pressure will just sieve to the backside instead of building up.
It does the opposite.
It does the opposite.
Yeah.
This emits more signal where there's no room nodes and less signal where there's a room node. So it works. It cleans up the room at the same time when you play.
That was the thing that we also noticed in Denmark. It's just like the mid-range is better. The highs are clearer. It's not just, we're adding a little bit in the lower octave or a little bit more oomph, but everything becomes more of a walk-in soundstage. Or as Peter said, it feels like it's going through you with the M8 to an extreme, of course. But even here, with the M2 Gold Signature and a pair of BM3s, it had some of that quality already.
Of course, not of course, but it does. It is quite remarkably how much it cleans up everything, and it makes the speakers better. You play next to them, it makes them a lot better. But I think also this is a result of, if you look at what a transient is, a transient basically contains all frequencies.
Yes.
From the lowest bass to the highest treble. That's what you have in a transient. So if you now have a system that can actually handle the lower part of the transient in time with the speakers next to it handling the transient, that means that it becomes a coherent whole. And when something becomes coherent, we have a much a better way of understanding it. So our brain and our body receives the same signal for the same thing, make everything clearer.
Were you, when you say transients, this is actually very interesting. We should look into that on frequency analysis. Is it true that transients, regardless, contain the full spectrum?
I think that when you hit a hi-hat,
because of the noise component?
When you hit a cymbal, you have an initial flexing of the whole thing. And that flexing is also sound.
Right.
Even if most of what you hear is maybe 500 and up hertz, but that initial flexing, that creates a pressure. And that pressure is also part of the cymbal sounding the way the cymbal is. So when you have a live drum kit and people are playing that, everything, the skin on the snare drum is big. So that creates also a pressure, even if what you hear is...
Yeah, also from an engineering perspective, it's interesting that you say that, because a lot of engineers routinely cut off the lows. They put a high pass on a hi-hat, and it's actually you are castrating the signal. Because there is also low-end information.
There's low,
going on
and when you hear things on this system that has made a simple recording, two microphone, where it's not cut off, where it's not multi-mic'd the same way, you hear this incredible room information there. You hear and if you go back to the 50s recordings of the jazz, you hear.
It's often more satisfying.
It is more because those things are still there.
Exactly.
And I think the producers are gradually learning that as well. I see recently there has been many very, very good recordings. Some of them are maybe done by accident because they are done in a home studio. Maybe they did not know to truncate the signal or take the bass away from this and those things.
And you get the full range.
You get the full range and you get more.
Yeah, Smith was big about that.
Yeah.
We noticed it doesn't matter how high it plays, there is no movement on the bass modules, because they're very calm, very quiet when they're working. Is that because obviously the speakers are working?
Yeah, but they work like this. That means all the mechanical stress balances out. It balances out, and because the box is open, it does not build up any pressure inside or outside.
But that's also an advantage over traditional subwoofers. Right?
Yeah, I don't. In my book, they're flawed. They're flawed from the engineering concept that we need to create pressure to create air motion. So we take an extra step. So a traditional sub has to fight a lot of things. It has to fight an uneven acoustic impedance behind in the cabinet, the resonances, everything that goes on in there, but also an uneven acoustic impedance outside, because the room has notes, the room has pressure resonances, and those things. Instead here it aids, the system aids and lifts and nullifies the room notes, where when you have a traditional subwoofer that works with pressure, you work against the room notes, and they become notoriously very difficult to set up, and most require a measurement microphone and a DSP in order to get a good frequency response in the room, and that works in that position but not in that position. And I think that in my book, the traditional way of making subwoofers should be a thing of the past.
Let's wrap up the subwoofer. It looks beautiful. It's easily the world's most attractive looking bass module. So the materials are, we have here on top aluminum, right? And then what else?
The top is a stainless steel.
Stainless steel.
Wood aluminium sandwich. So is the bottom. And the side panels are wood fiber board,
Wood fiber board. Okay.
but with carbon on the outside. And the carbon is 1 millimeter thick, so it's a sheet that's with the vacuum pressed on the side and create a very, very stiff and acoustically dead. Because the outside is the only thing that can vibrate. Because everything is balanced in the motion, but on the outside to the wall of the cabinet, there is a little pressure.
Yeah.
Because it has to be redirected out
This
towards
is
the back.
not your average subwoofer or bass module. This is very, very beautifully crafted. Then we have an extensive menu where we have the low pass, we have the...
Inside there's a 300 watt amplifier driving it. And it's a 2-channel, so it drives one side and one side. So it's a 2-channel amplifier we use to drive. So these 2 drivers are connected in.
You even mentioned yesterday that if someone only uses one and they're feeding the left and the right in there, that each side, one side does the left channel and the other side does the right channel.
Yeah.
And, so we have
but of course, because of pressures, it will be mixed up, so it's a mono signal coming out. And if you look at how bass is usually mixed it's always also mixed into mono, so I don't think it makes a difference. But it can.
It can.
Essentially,
it can. Yeah. That's super nice. And then we have the drivers are...
Yeah, I should talk about the crossover, because it's an electronic crossover, and you can adjust, of course, the levels up and down. You can adjust the phase. You can invert it fully, but you can also adjust the phase gradually. And that is useful if your side speakers maybe have big drivers that are quite slow, so you want to match that by shifting the phase a little bit. And it can also be that your positioning is not... We position them here on a sort of like a circle, because you sit in the middle.
On like the same radius.
Yeah. So basically, that's where we place them. But it could be that was not possible. Then it's nice to be able to play around with the phase to get the timing correct.
Yeah, I think that's huge.
And of course, also the cutoff frequency you can adjust. You can invert the phase, so instead of the drivers moving like this, they move like that, 180 degree, but there's also settings in between that.
And it's gradual.
Yeah, it's a gradual thing. So,
perfect.
We also have the same filter built into our amps.
Yeah.
And there you can have the convenience of having a remote control, because there is one place, so you can control both channels at the same time. So if you are into our products and have a lineup of our products, you don't need to use the filter in there. You could just do this as a bypass and then use the filter in the preamp or in the integrated amp.
In this case, what we did is, because we were sending high pass and low pass to the 2 P880s, so we used the full pre-out.
What we have been doing here is that we're running the M2s active, meaning that we use 2 power amps, and we feed each power amp a frequency section.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And especially if you use a high pass on the 40 hertz or 50 hertz, high pass on the mid section, on the bass mid section of the speaker, then you relieve the driver of having to do the work for the very, very low frequencies. That gives it a bigger headroom. And you can load them harder.
Yeah,
and
we did that upstairs in Studio B with the M1s, where we used the high pass, essentially from 40 or 45 hertz on, and then had the subwoofer, and it allowed us to play it much louder with difficult material.
Yes.
Because
you take you relieve the mid-range from doing the very deep bass work.
Yes.
So when you do a two-way, like the M1s is a two-way monitor, you want them to be able to handle the deepest bass. Yeah. But when you add a pair of subs, they don't need to handle the deepest bass anymore. Yeah. So when you set up a good cable loom with a good power distribution, you can create a much more inert environment for your system to work in and within. I think a very good part of why power chords sound different is that they are, to some degree, antennas. They can be very good antennas and very bad antennas. And there's no doubt in my mind that bad antennas sounds the best. So our cables with the multiple lengths of materials we have with no fixed length when we have the Tesla coil and the coils at the ends by the plugs, all these things make it almost impossible to define a length. And that means that it's not a dipole antenna anymore. And I think that is one very good argument why power chords matter. Another thing is that when you twist something this way and you also twist it this way, you have two coils running down, meaning that instead of creating induction, it actually cancels
out
induction.
Yes.
And if you make a power amp, damping factor is everything, or mostly everything. But damping factor also includes the inductance that is in the cable. So if the cable have high inductance, then all of a sudden your amp don't have any damping factor. Because it's masked by the inductance of the cable. And these things, so cables have a huge influence.
It work as a system.
It has to work as a system.
So as to work as a system. We have, of course, that antenna effect particularly strong with interconnects, right? That's probably where we have seen we had one client who was extremely close to a radio station tower, and he was getting, not in your cables, but he was getting a radio signal. It was very good. We joked we get 2 for 1. You have 2 performances you can listen to at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah, I used to do a lot of turntable things, and I had a JFET-based pre-pre, and that has very high input impedance on the devices. So it worked also as a perfect antenna for the hospital. So I could hear the internal communication in my phono stage. So making cables that, of course, the smaller the signal is, the more important that they don't pick up noise becomes.
Especially with phono. Yeah.
Especially with phono.
Yeah.
Phono is very perceptible for that.
The Ansuz line of cables has gotten continuously better and better and more revealing, to the point where we thought it's impossible to top that. And then, with the Supreme, for example, and then Gold Signature for us was a revelation, absolute revelation, where we sat for hours hearing things in more layers and more details that we didn't think was there. Even in my headphones, I couldn't hear it. So that is remarkable. That is the materials that you're using in the Ansuz cables, in the higher end Ansuz cables. What can you tell us about those?
Well, are we talking conductors? Are we talking isolation?
Both.
We use our conductors are mainly and always silver-plated copper. But in the Gold Signature, they are silver-plated copper with gold plating. So that means that there's also here multiple layers. Like I don't know what gold does on an electrical level. It's not as good as a conductor as silver. But it's less corrosive than silver or more noble than silver. But I think more it's the mechanical thing that happens when you add the gold, which is quite soft, to something that's quite hard. Because when you draw the cable, it hardens. So you add quite a soft material to something hard, and I think that creates a sort of like a skin layer that's soft. But when you look at how a signal runs or a conductor, there's actually no signal moving inside the cable. It's all outside the cable, in a field outside the cable. So maybe the surface layer matter more than we think, because everything goes on out there. It's an electro wave outside the cable.
And then you have, of course, the noise cancelling technology on top of it, right?
Yes, I think that this is the bad antenna part.
Yeah.
If you can make a cable that is very low inductance, that means that it does not change impedance with different frequency. A transient can travel through it without any problems. And if it then also becomes a very bad antenna, then those two things together creates a good cable. Mechanical stability also creates a good cable. If you have conductors, there's always, you have current going to and current coming from. So you always have something that wants to interact with each other. And if you make a cable where these two conductors are suspended towards each other in rubber, you get this elasticity, this tone of the copper of the rubber goes into the cable. And if you have tried to play around with these things quite a few times, you know the signature of certain cables. You know why they are like they are. And some cables with the air suspended conductors have a huge problem because the conductors are not really stable. So they end up also having a mechanical resonance towards it. I think that one significant thing we have seen is that the first cable going from the wall into your distribution sort of sets the level you're at.
The mains 8.
The cable going from the wall socket into the mains 8, that sort of sets the level. So you can make a Gold Signature setup even if you take lesser cables for the rest of it. After that.
Yeah. One thing I noticed is that we do at trade shows just disconnect everything, like literally plug it in and out, and the system performs better. It resets. Why is that? Is that because
I think Fleming that works with us used to have a device called, I think, Axxess, something like that. I think he called it the Axxess. And that was essentially a demagnetizer.
Okay.
So he played white noise as a collection of signs into the system at ever decreasing level. And that sort of did the same thing. And I think when you unplug it, everything calms down and can start again. I think.
So you're getting rid of static?
I think you do.
What's around the corner for you? Where do you see the next cool developments coming out of Audio Denmark?
Yeah, it's a public shared secret that we go into analog. So we have an analog project with a turntable and cartridges and tone arm, etc. Yeah. We are going in that direction. Yeah, and of course, this is very near to my heart because I've been essentially, ever since I've been working together with Lars, I've had this Skunkworks project with a turntable and air-bearing turntable. Now it seems like we are somewhere longer in the process so that we can make an introduction hopefully next year. Beautiful. Hopefully next year, yeah. So I look forward to that. That's going to be.
I've seen the prototype and heard it.
Yeah. Now it's actually playing. So now we are at least closer than we have been. And what you saw on the turntable was a prototype that was entirely built in-house. Yeah. There was nothing. There was nothing that we have had our normal catalog of sub-suppliers because we wanted to test out the concept. Yeah. So we had an outsider doing the turning and the grinding of the shafts and the bearing parts. So we had that outside done. But apart from that, the plinth, everything was built in-house.
Beautiful. And then you have a collaboration with DS Audio.
Yeah, we will make 3 different cartridges. Yeah. And what we do there is we make the design, select the materials, select the coatings, for the base, for the cartridge to be mounted on, and for the head shell around it. So we get to put in our influence there. We put in our influence other places as well, as a terminal board with the pin layout will have Tesla coils on it.
Very, very nice. Will there be different performance level of that turntable, or
there will.
You're starting with the flagship and.
There will be. We will make them all at the same time because we know how to level them.
Beautiful.
And that will be a choice of materials. So if you take a platter, you can take a platter and you can make it basic. But you can take the same platter and fit that out with weights of tungsten and weights of zirconium and add all these material knowledge into the platter. And that will definitely change the performance.
Beautiful.
Yeah, if you talk about the future, there will be a more cost-effective solution for that. So
a smaller one, right?
Yeah, we will make a roughly same width, same depth, maybe not quite as steep, but about this height. So we will make
2/3 maybe?
Yeah, something like that. So we will make a small bass cube, and that will fit the X and the C, and have something that we can get the qualities that we experience here, but also all the qualities of the annihilation of the room acoustics.
Beautiful.
So that will aid a C monitor or a C2 or C3 or an X3 or an X2.
I think that's excellent. That's excellent. It makes such a huge difference turning really the monitor into a full range speaker.
Yeah, yeah.
In essence.
Yeah. I don't know if I have big expectation to the market in general, but there are companies that make a living out of creating subwoofers, and I think that they also should take notice. In a way, because I think the performance we can create is far above and beyond where they are.
Yes. Yeah.
But we also have to we also have to realize that most of these are not essentially made for music. Most of them are made for home theater setup, and I think maybe the demands are a little bit different there, where the pressure may be welcome.
Yeah. It's kind of nice if it hits you in the chest.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is a very different experience, but the speed of the bass, the details, the lack of these bass problems that you usually have for me is a no-brainer. Much superior performance.
I still have to experience what it does in a home theater setting, but I think it will be working there really well as well. We have also created the Center 3. So it is a very, very high-performing center speaker.
Well, center channel is super important in terms of the
because all
the
and what you have seen if you listen to our speakers is that diction is everything.
Yes.
Understanding what the singer is singing, the wording, the how.
Yeah.
So when we do something in a center speaker at a very high level, that improves the overall performance.
Will there be an M center speaker?
I don't know. Maybe.
Maybe. Let me ask you this. Were you surprised about the success of the immense jump in quality from the M8?
Yes. I was generally surprised that we could take it that far.
Yeah.
I was generally surprised that when we took that to a concert hall with seating for 300 people, that we could play rock concert levels on a stage with 2 speakers.
Yeah.
Not only fill the room, but load the room so you could really feel what was going on in the music. We could play louder than a symphony orchestra. I think we played some of the Beatles tracks we played, they were live level in that big room.
Yeah.
And I think that was remarkable, but it just shows that is a remarkable product in many aspects. Not only is it intimate and delicate and fine and textured and wonderfully colored in the way it plays, but it can also do it very loud.
No, the M8 does come with a very high exclusivity factor. From what Peter told me, is you're manufacturing only 5 per year?
Yeah, this year we can do 5. Next year we can maybe do 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's exclusive in that respect. It takes 2 guys 2 months to put them together.
Yeah.
So it is from building the drivers, from making the cables, from installing everything to, it is a tedious process. And
not too much.
there will never be for a speaker in that price point.
Yeah.
It will never be sold by the thousands anyway.
No.
So it will be limited. It will be exclusive. There's a plaque in the back, so our clients could get their name on it, built exclusive for them. There's also a program in place, and when you have a client buying, they will come visit us, see their speaker getting built, talk to the guy building them.
Beautiful.
So there's a lot of things but it is, we cannot make
Are they allowed to bring gifts to influence?
Yeah, of course, we take any bribes. Yeah.
Excellent.